born has such a profound impact on how our lives unfold. We all watch the Syrian refugee crisis transpire through the media. Photos of children, life rafts, families fleeing unspeakable horrors. But Sara Sawatzki, she didn't just watch, she acted. She acted in a way that even the most civic-minded of us may not have risked. Sara has a call to serve. After a sleepless night of internet surfing, Sara came upon an article that would change her life. We get to meet this remarkable woman here now. Sara, why don't you come out and join me, and we will talk a little bit about your experience. Take it in. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
I would love to hear a little bit more about the experience you had. Tell us a little bit about how you decided to go over and help the refugee crisis.
Sure. Well, I found myself awake one night at 3 a.m. staring at the first article on my newsfeed. It was a story about how the community of Lesbos, Greece, had rallied together to help refugees. It was incredibly inspiring, and I just kept reading more stories. Stories of survival, stories of heroism, stories of smugglers and fake life jackets. It was essentially stories of the best and worst of humanity. And my decision to go over there was swift and final, so like any rational person, I slept for 2 hours, wandered into work, and I asked my boss for a month off, and a couple of weeks later, I was on Lesbos.
Wow. Can you help our audience and myself understand a little bit more around the global problem?
Sure.
We see it in the news, but just give us a little bit more background.
Yeah. Well, we're currently facing the largest refugee crisis since World War II. There are an estimated 65.3 million refugees and displaced people in the world right now, which equates out to about 1 out of every 113 people on the planet. And while statistics and numbers are powerful, I want to stress that we aren't dealing with numbers. We're dealing with individual people, mothers, fathers, children, grandparents, and they need our help and deserve our respect.
So what kind of volunteer work did you do?
I volunteered for a Norwegian organization called Drop in the Ocean. We provided a 24-hour patrol of the northern shore on the lookout for boats coming over from Turkey, and we also provided beach cleanup on occasion. And before I went over there, we actually raised about $2,500 from friends and family to buy supplies for Karatepe, the largest open refugee camp on the island. We were able to buy about 5,000 cups worth of tea, school supplies for the education center, and tools and seeds to help start up a refugee-run vegetable garden on the camp, at the camp. But no matter how much you do when you go over there, when you come back, you kind of feel like you didn't do enough because the situation is just so massive.
What do you want people to know about coming back and what the experience was like?
Sure. You know, one thing that I've noticed since I've come back is that people are very quick to compliment. And they'll say things like, oh, how wonderful, and thank you so much for doing this. And I know that these comments are sincere, but what I want to tell people is this. I don't want your thanks. I don't want your praise. I want your action. I want you to pay attention to what is going on in the world and do something to make a difference. It's not good enough to just read a story and sympathize anymore. We want you to join us and take part.
So how can people learn more about how to help?
Well, there's dozens, probably even hundreds of ways that you can get involved. You can donate money, you can donate clothing, you can help refugees that recently arrived learn English, you can drive them to appointments. You can even help set up their apartments before they arrive and fill their apartments with groceries and supplies, which I did recently, and it was an amazing experience. So there's really just tons of different ways that you can get involved. You just kind of have to find the one that fits for you.
Okay. We have on the screen some ideas of ways to get involved, and you're also welcome to talk to Sara in the Lead Commons during the breaks and lunch to learn more. So before we go, is there a particular refugee or volunteer whose story just really left a lasting impression with you?
Absolutely. So one of the amazing things about my decision to go over to Greece was that when I told my mom what I was doing, she immediately got excited and she wanted to get involved and come along too. And so one of the most poignant moments actually happened when a refugee actually helped my mom at the end of the trip. We were sitting at an outdoor waiting area, waiting to board the ferry back to Athens, and there was only one other person sitting there, and he had this intense, distant stare on his face, as if he had lived 1,000 lives in a matter of years. He sat and he smoked and he stared at the ferry, but didn't say a word. His shoes were tattered and water-stained, and as we got up to board the boat, the man came over to us and he smiled. And he was as tall as he was lean, and he had these incredibly kind eyes. He motioned to the boat. "Athena?" he asked. We said yes, we were going to Athens too, and he offered to carry my mom's luggage for her. So he grabbed the handle of the suitcase and walked alongside of us across the port and over to the boat. But in the chaos of boarding, we didn't get a chance to properly thank him. And a short while later, though, I wandered up to the back deck of the boat, and I found the man sitting there, that same intense, distant stare on his face. And I walked up to him, and that intense stare just melted into a warm smile. I thanked him for helping out with the luggage, and asked him where he was from. "Syria," he said. He told me he'd come over on a boat from Turkey. He touched the top of his head and looked up at the sky. He was alone, and that spoke volumes. He had received his papers in the asylum process to move on to mainland Greece, and I wished him a peaceful and safe journey forward before parting ways. Later, as the boat took off from port, I went back up to watch the sunset, and I found him still sitting there, staring out at the coast of Mytilene as we pulled away from land. He was once again in the waters that he had journeyed to Lesbos on. I watched as his intense stare looked down at the waters below and then off to Turkey in the distance, his eyes focused 1,000 miles away. My mom and we slept in a private cabin on the boat that night. We had to buy a third suitcase to fit all the stuff that we were bringing home. That guy sat somewhere in that boat that night on a chair, his entire world stuffed into a tiny backpack. And I think about him almost every day, and the short, brief encounter that we shared with each other before parting from shore. One of us filled with guilt for having the luxury of being able to go home, and the other reluctantly continuing his long journey away from his.
Wow. So would you go and help again?
In a heartbeat.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Sara Sawatzki.
Beautiful.